Cover some Photoshop things today briefly. Um, Again, there's a lot of different ways you can make, and I was thinking of making forms, because most of the data that you would be putting on your app would be, a lot of data would be, how does the person log in, right? How do they log in? How do I make a login screen? Right? How do I make a login screen? Do you use a pill? Remember, these are called pills. Do you have a box for the username, or do you just have a line like this, an icon and a line like this, and then the login is here? Do you notice how the login is always a different color? Do you see that? Most of these are different color, different color, different color, different color. Look, this one's red. Again, it's just name, email, phone number, password. This is a register screen. Am I making a register screen, or am I making a pill button, pill button, pill button? Or am I making one big box, which has the line that goes there? This one has a gradient. So just keep that in mind. Next week I'll talk a little bit more in depth about forms and what makes good forms. But today I just wanted to go over some Photoshop things as you are working in Photoshop. Oh, here's the Amazon login. There it is. Again, they just have a gray box with a white box for your email and password. They got your forgot password, and then they have this gradient here button there for your login. Or am I a new customer? So you should really think about what kind of login they would do. What I wanted to demonstrate a little bit was, of course, just some of the features you can add to either a pill or some kind of button. So if I was,
Jeff,
yes?
do you use colors directly in Sketch, or do you have to import it from Photoshop, or is it, which way is best to do your design?
In Sketch or Photoshop? What do you mean?
Well, if we're using Sketch to do our mock-up,
Mm-hmm.
can we change the buttons to purple?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We can do a whole color lecture if you want about choosing colors and saving that color palette and then bringing it in. How about I do that next week? You want to do that? And then we'll have an assignment where you have to do that.
So is our presentation due Monday then?
I don't know. I just don't know where you're at and how far you're going to be. I don't know. Since nobody comes to class, I'm just, I'm thinking of just changing gears and doing something different. I don't know.
Okay, so we have nothing to turn in on?
No, I wouldn't worry unless your partner is here and you want to show something on Monday. I don't know. I'm just going to start demoing again and move on from whatever, I guess. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what to do myself. I would love to figure that out if I could. I don't know how or what progress we're at if people don't come to class.
Personally, I would like some more practice with using
Yep,
Sketch.
that's what I'm going to do.
I don't know about anybody else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so next week I'll demonstrate how to make forms, and then we'll have how to choose a color palette and import that color palette, and then I'll give you an assignment to do that so you can practice.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
So how to choose color palette. Maybe talk a little Android now. How about we get into the Android? I think Android is fun, and I think it's worthwhile, especially talking about material design. Let me finish with this. I just want to show you some problems that you're going to run into using Photoshop. So let's say I want, remember, if I'm using Photoshop to make an interface, I tend to use, again, these custom shapes down here because they are vector and you can adjust them right here. So, of course, you have the round pill shape right here, this one. So this one's the round rectangle tool. And when you're making it, you can actually adjust the actual corner. So if I just click and draw the round one, you'll see I get these corners that are really small. What if I want a more pill shape? There is an option under Properties inside of Photoshop. Inside of Properties, you'll notice you have some options, and these options, of course, are the corner edges right here, as well as color right here, as well as stroke right there. So you have options for how the actual shape is made. So if I want rounder edges, again, let me zoom in here. If I want rounder edges for my pill shape than what the standard is giving me, the standard round rectangle, you go to properties inside of Photoshop, and then you could either dial in, and what I mean by dial is you put your cursor over the edge there and you get your little finger that goes in both directions, and you can dial, and it'll do both edges. And you'll notice, see how it changed because I had it selected already. It was the last one I made. So you can actually do it kind of dynamically if you want. You can see it change right there. And so, you know, that's a kind of a standard. And I just use this ugly pill color here. We don't have to do purple. Yeah, let's just wait till next week and I'll go over a whole discussion of how to make a color palette. See these palettes right here? You can make your own palette and share it with other people. And so, how about we go with a pink? How about that? That's kind of beautiful color. There we go. So, inside of this properties window, you have a variety of options. If you want, do you remember the Amazon one was a gradient? If you want a gradient in this pill shape, you can actually go over here to the gradient option right there, and you have your gradient option as well. So if you wanted a gradient option, you can do that as well. Again, it's inside the properties window is where you can adjust all these settings here. And in this case, it's just this is kind of purple to white. And try not to be so dramatic with your colors in a gradient. Very subtle gradient is good. You definitely do not want to do something like that. I mean, it might look cool on the computer screen, but boy, you put some text on there and nobody's going to be able to read that. All right? So try and be subtle with choosing colors for your option. In addition, you have a stroke, which can be a line that goes around the outside right here. You can have a stroke color. You can change the size of the stroke. So, you know, something like that is a nice kind of pill shape. Now, in material design, they take advantage a lot of material design, of course, is the Android one, right? They take a lot of advantage of shadows, okay? And so in order to add shadows to this pill shape button that we have here, you can do that by going into the layers window. And then, oh, geez, hold on. There we go. In the layers window right here, you'll notice you have your effects down here. And so, of course, the most common would be to use the drop shadow option right here. It gives you a drop shadow option, and you can see you have, of course, distance, and you have size, you have rotation, and so on. So, you know, this is fine to use that. And in fact, in a lot of the programs, you can have a drop shadow. As far as like in Xcode, you can have a drop shadow on your button, as well as in other areas you can do a drop shadow. So, you know, drop shadow, just a subtle one like that, gives it a kind of 3D look. The other kind of look they do also in a pill shape or something might be an inner shadow. There's one called inner shadow right here. And it gives it kind of a 3D button at the top up here. And you can adjust that as well. And you also have an inner glow. I wouldn't use inner shadow and inner glow. The inner glow is kind of universal. It goes all the way around the size. You can see it goes in all directions. It doesn't really have an option to adjust location. So the inner glow is kind of a big kind of inner glow, where the inner shadow is being driven by an actual light. You'll notice there's one called Use Global Light. And what the problem that you might run into with the global light is that if I adjust the global light and say, okay, I want to adjust it, it will also adjust the shadow, the drop shadow that I've already made. You see that? If I move this over to this side, notice how the drop shadow changes as well as the inner shadow changes. So if you're trying to adjust things like drop shadow, the angle here, if you turn this off, then you can adjust them separately. So I want to change the inner shadow from this side to down on this side. I turn it off, and then I can adjust it, and now you see you have the shadow down there without messing with the other shadow. Does that make sense? Have you ever tried the global lights before? Yes? Okay. Yeah. I'm just making sure you know what I'm kind of doing here. I tend not to put textures inside of buttons. I don't really like bevel and emboss. I don't like that. I like the inner shadow. I like the drop shadow, but I'm not really keen on the bevel and emboss. Satin is going to be like a glow kind of thing. Color overlay is a great way to change a button without having to adjust anything. You can also do a gradient overlay, which would override the original gradient that I put in the button. That's one way that you can override it. And then, of course, they have a pattern overlay, and then they have the outer glow, which would be a glow around the outside. I don't tend to use any of those. The only ones I like to use maybe inner shadow and drop shadow. And, of course, once you apply those, you can take those effects and apply them to another button. So let's just say that, you're making, here, this one's a login, and this is his password, so maybe we call this one. And then when you're putting text in and you're using these shapes, don't put the text inside the object. It thinks you want to apply it to the object. See that? See how my cursor changes to a circle with a I bar, where up here it doesn't have a circle with an I bar. If I click on this, it thinks I want to put the text inside the shape, and I don't want to do that. I just want text above. So I'm going to undo that. Oh, can't undo. Can't. So usually what I do is I click outside and I put my text in. And of course this is a horrible font. And next week we'll also talk about some fonts too. We'll talk about the most common ones that would be used, dynamic fonts. I'm going to go with my San Francisco, my favorite new font. There it is, San Francisco. My favorite new font. Make sure that's aligned to the left. It is. And then let's put in our password. So I have a login and password button. Kind of nice looking. But if you remember from our looking at the samples on the website, most of the time the button to hit to log in is actually a different color, right? See, it's a different color. Different color. You get the idea. Yeah, look, different color. So what if I want to use a different color, but I want to keep the actual effects that I applied, right? So I can duplicate my shape. I'm going to duplicate this shape. And then I'm going to change the color by using the properties window. Remember, the properties window is where I adjust it. I'm going to go back to a solid color, and I want to do a nice yellow. We'll copy Amazon. Well, they use a gradient. I'm not going to use a gradient. But what I'm trying to say is, you'll notice when I copied this button, it also copied the effects, right? The effects were copied as well. So then I can add my, what is login? Login? What's that?
I'm for your next class.
You can do whatever you want. That's fine. So this is username. This isn't login. This would be login down here, right? And this would be username. Ah. Can undo. So again, there's a lot of different ways that you can use shadows as well as strokes and inner glow. And so if we zoom in here to 100%, we can see kind of the inner glow right there, as well as the shadow, and then a nice, nice stroke. Have you all tried the shadows before? Yeah. Yeah? Okay. Just keep in mind, I wanted to make sure you know the. So look at detail. You know, detail's important. Just that fine little shadow. And we can move on from there as far as detail. You know, login screens, there's a whole bunch of different ones that you can do. Simple line ones. Look at a Tumblr one is pretty simple. As well as the what is that? Airbnb. Also, search boxes. How to do good search boxes. We can talk about that as well. And if we look at some of them, again, they just have a simple search box. Where do you want to go, and so on. So we can talk about that as well. And you got your burger menu. Is this the pin? Is this the? Oh, this is the Pinterest login. Again, this one just has what? Just a kind of a round button on a white background. So if you notice, a lot of logins use both a box for the login and then color for the, as well as a different color here. Or of course you can use your Google account or your Facebook account. Very simple. Try not to do too dramatic as far as gradients and things like that. Look at this login. It's basically just round boxes and so on. Okay, I don't know. You think you know, you understand how to use the effects in Photoshop?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. I just wanted to cover that today. I don't know. So the other things you could be looking at, of course, on so don't forget, I want you to watch the video. If you haven't seen the video yet, this one. Again, you have to play it in there, but I thought it was pretty good video about feedback. Okay, feedback, as well as we watched this one last class, right? Native apps versus mobile apps. Daddy Google and Mother Apple. What was it? The guy talking about. Next week we'll do forms. Again, you can do some reading here. There's some forms. I don't think this website's working. Oh, there it is. So we'll talk about forms and how important forms are. What are some good guidelines to follow when making forms? There's some old form information, new form information, and so on. This looks kind of old. So I'll find some more form information. There's some videos that talk about making forms. So we'll talk about login screens as well as color information. Really, the other thing I'll go over is I'll post some videos about how to do the material design if you haven't read about material design. Material design is something that you should look into, how to work with materials. Again, they use a lot of shadows in material design. You can see it right here. See it right here. Just like I just showed you inside. They even have a shadow here. If you look at this one right here, right? The search box that's above the map has a shadow, a slight shadow that goes around the bottom if you see it right there. The purpose of the material design and how the material design works, of course, is it's done by hand, and so basically Google wanted to be able, and hence the word material design is they wanted to be able to take real material, let's say a piece of paper, and then fold it, right, in certain ways, okay, to make a new shape. Trying to make it folded. They're not very good. Whatever. I don't know. Pretty bad fold job there. But how they came up with the idea of material design is actually by folding paper and then lighting it and then photographing it. And you ever notice when they Google again material design, you can see the shadow here, and when you click on it, it actually moves. Okay, and the shadow will get bigger and smaller as you're interacting with a button. So you know, you can see the shadow here as well. And so I have some good videos that I will post that explains how they came up with the concept. And the guy who started folding the paper and photographing it at Google, I have a video of him talking about that. So I'll post that as well. So we'll get into some materials on it because I think it's a good concept. I know I'm kind of stuck in the Apple world because, you know,
That video you posted was good. The other one that he was talking about, it's a good time to be a UX designer. Yeah, I watched it last time. It's pretty good.
So, what program would you use to get the shadow to move or do?
people use Photoshop, people use Sketch.
So you can do.
You can do shadows in Sketch as
No,
well.
but like when you hover over it, it changes. Like and then when you.
To
move
do
away
the
from it.
interaction like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, to do the animation, there's a variety of programs that can simulate that. I think they were using even Keynote, actual Keynote, the presentation software on Mac,
Yeah.
can do those material design things where you can do the interaction with the shadow adjusting.
But then you have to export it as a unit. Is that what we're
Yeah,
saying?
it's just for prototyping. I mean, to do the actual thing, you do programming, right?
Or they use like After Effects to do that.
You can do After Effects to simulate the animation as well. I wanted to, my goal was that we would have some screens for this, and then I would show us how to make a prototype. Still do that.
Or maybe we could just do one, one continuous, one class prototype instead of having multiple groups, because.
I have a sample that's almost done and ready to prototype of my food app, which is Food for All, I think it was, where I made several screens for a delivery of leftover food. My section is leftover food. But I was going to demonstrate how to do a prototype with my screens that I made. So again, make sure you read up about material design. Very interesting way that flat design is done. And that's not to say you can't do that in Apple. I know Apple is, you can take the same concepts that they have and then we could talk about the way that they measure. And of course I use Roboto is the font for Android, right? Where the font for Apple would be San Francisco. They're both, of course, a sans serif font. The other thing you'll notice is they have uppercase letters, uppercase letters, uppercase letters, uppercase letters, where a lot of the Apple stuff is lowercase letters. Did you notice that?
I find that Apple and PCs always do the opposite. Like when you shrink and enlarge the screen, it's on the left on the Mac, and then on the PC, it's on the right. They don't match at all. And like when I scroll the mouse, one wants to go up, and the other one wants to go down and go the same direction.
Uh-huh. And so they show you the animations. You can see the shadow there. And the way that they choose is much different than Apple. And then they go over color, and we should talk about color and how to choose the color. Now, Android has a certain way of doing color in that they use tints of color. And so this is how they came up with the concepts and so on. So I'll find some videos, especially the one where the person who's taken photos of the material is a pretty good video. It shows how to do all that.